Morning class. This class is going to be for both my home gardening class and my greenhouse management class, and we'll overlap some things back and forth. But something that I would like to bring to everybody's attention is that 2 years ago we brought in a bunch of begonias and we planted them. We were hoping to use the plant sale this spring to sell these plants, but what's happening is that they're starting to mature too fast, and we're getting a lot of old growth that is starting to break off and this, that, and other, and they really need to be put in the ground right now so that we can develop a better plant. As you can see from here on the older growth, the old growth, it's have some real hard wood that's become very brittle. And so transplanting it makes it a very difficult task. Another thing that we could probably do to help it is to go ahead and cut a lot of this back so that it allows the plant to fully grow and develop a little stronger trunk. Another thing that I'd like to bring to attention is, of course, a student brought these plants in. He had gotten at a plant sale, and he was trying to get them to recover a lot faster. The unfortunate part is that some of it has gotten some spider mite on it, and you can see how damaging the spider mite could do to a plant if it's not taken care of. This one seems to be doing a lot better. And again, when you talk about pests, if a plant is healthy, a lot of times it will resist a plant. Resist the insect. So keeping fertilizer at a good normal level will keep the plant healthy, and a lot of times it will deter insect from damaging. This one probably got a little bit too much water in the root zone, and it weakened the plant. Plus you can see that it's awful loose in the soil, and of course a weak plant will bring in more insects damage. Here's another plant it's a new style of pot called an air pot. And as you can see, it's got a bunch of holes coming around it so that there's plenty of air circulation around the root zone, and root rot is checked a little bit better. This one, the fern really enjoyed it, or likes it a lot. And you can see as a fern, it's already finding a spot to bring out new fronds. And if we were to leave this alone, every one of these holes would have a sprout of fern on it. And I think that's what we're going to do, just as an experiment, to see how well it works. Now, make a comparison. These two plants were brought in at the same time. This one is a conventional planting. Plenty of moisture in the soil, maybe a little bit too much, but because it's the air root pot, you can see that the plant is doing a lot better. Its growth is a lot taller. The plant looks really good. As you can look at the soil medium, it's staying somewhat dry looking, composed to this one, which is a lot wetter. I'm going to move some of the soil around just a little bit so you can see the dampness of it. And so each time a person comes in and waters the greenhouse, this one just gets more water. That causes a little bit more damaging to the root. Where this air pot is keeping the soil moisture even, but it's also allowing it to dry out enough so that you can have a good root zone. We have now moved into the second part of the greenhouse, the middle room. And what I would like to show some of you is some of the cuttings that you've made in class. We have a stem cutting, and you can see how well the stem cutting on this rubber tree is done. It's already putting out a lot of new growth, and there's just little bitty roots popping out of the bottom of the pot. This was a stem cutting, and this one was a leaf cutting. And as you can see, it's done very, very well. I'm going to gently lift it out here so that you can see the root, how well it's developed. Actually, this one really needs to be moved into another pot, but you can see the concentration of the roots starting to hang out of the bottom of the pot. This is going to make an excellent plant in a couple of years. The same with this stem cutting that was right here. Now these it's hard to compare, but a lot of these were done at the same time. Some of them may get a little bit, had a little bit stronger root system and have taken off pretty rapidly. Also, we also planted some oak trees. We used the regular oak seedling. When we did it in different stages, we left some of them, we cracked the hard shell on it Some of them we soaked in hot water, and some of them we just let natural take over. This one actually was a natural. We just let nature take care of it. So we planted it in soil, and we just let nature take care of itself. And you can see it's germinated, and it's really produced a really nice oak tree. The same with this one. This one is one that we soaked in hot water. It has not developed at all. It hasn't even begun to break into the seed coat. A lot of times the best thing to do is you want to kind of gently crack it or scarify that seed head so that water can penetrate in there and allow it to germinate a lot better. This was one of the figs where they had taken a stem cutting and put it in the misting bench. If I can pull that out. Again, you can see the root system on it and how well it's done. We've got a lot of roots coming out of the bottom, and this one actually needs to be transferred into a larger pot so that the plant can extend itself. If you leave it in these small pots, the roots will begin to wrap themselves around the interior, and then it actually will choke itself. Behind us, I want to show you the difference between two peppers. These peppers were planted at the same time. This one was put, after it germinated, was put in this air pot, and this one was left alone in the small container. If this was transplanted into a larger container, obviously it would be a little bit bigger, but I want you to see the difference in the two different growths. When you have plenty of air and moisture around the root system, how well the plant does. Look at the size of the leaves. It's done very well, and it's grown in the same condition. Both of these have been in the middle greenhouse. We planted a lot of chamomile seed, and this is what's happening to it. The trouble with the light in the greenhouse is they become leggy and they begin to fall over, and then this is what happens if they're not transplanted early enough when they're in a small seedling area. This is really going to be hard to separate because the plants begin to twist itself around each other, and so when you do try to transplant it, you're probably going to damage a lot of the plants itself. But this really needs to go out in a garden area so that they can naturalize and grow a lot better than what it is. What I want to show you here in this picture is this lettuce. Again, should have been transplanted while it was still in a small leafy stage, but because of the lighting that we have in the greenhouse, they become leggy, and as you can see, the poor thing is falling over and now it's trying to compete for more light. This particular lettuce plant was right under a grow lamp, and you can see how much difference that growing lamp had made opposed to all the other ones around it. This one was directly under the grow lamp, which made a really hardy, healthy plant. It's ready to eat. Now this is the kale that came up. It looks really good yet. It's still not affected by any insects. The yellow leaves were the cotyledons of the plant, and they're going to fall off anyway. So a lot of times when you're out in your garden and you see yellow leaves like that, it's not necessarily that the plant is in bad shape. It's only because those were the original leaves that created the carbohydrates for this to grow. Now what I would like to bring up, and I'll show you this, and this is done by an experiment at my house. As far as insect damage, I've planted two kinds of lettuce and put them in my garden. I had lettuce on this side, I had the kale, and some more lettuce here. The insects went for the kale and they devastated. They've eaten every leaf off of the kale, but the lettuce on both sides of the kale never got any damage, and even today it still doesn't have any insect holes or in it. So a lot of times when you're home gardening, sometimes if you overplant in an area of a garden, it confuses insects. And so in this case, they liked the taste of the kale, and so all the insects went to the kale and left the lettuce alone. So a lot of times, if you overpopulate your garden with different basils, kale, in other plants that confuse an insect because they have a hormone that attracts them to a particular plant. And in those hormones, they enjoy it, and that's the one they're going to go to. So if you can plant a different variety of plants around your vegetable garden, you can confuse that insect, or they will only attract themselves to one style. Some people put marigolds in the garden because that will attract the insect to the marigolds instead of going to your regular vegetables. Okay, we've moved into the third room of the greenhouse, which is the room we call the parent room, where a lot of the plants in here is what we use to make our cuttings for the class. When the new classes come in, they come in here and make cuttings and either move them into the sand bench or just propagate them the best way it is. But what I would like for everybody to see right now is this bromeliad that I have in front of me. You can see the beautiful plumes that it's starting to put out. Right now it's in probably the best shape it can be. The interesting part about the bromeliad is that they do have like a pitcher, and water will collect down into these tubes, and as insects fly around, they fall into that water and they die, and they actually consume the protein from the insect, and that's how this plant really fertilizes itself. Now, of course, home fertilizing is just as important, because obviously if you had it in your house, you're not going to have the insects falling into it the way it would if it was in the natural state. It is a very large plant at this point, and it really needs to be broken up and propagated so that we can have more for the future. But I saw it here on the bench, and I wanted to bring it out to everybody's attention how beautiful it looks right now. Another thing that I would like to talk about is this walking iris. This is the only one we have left in the greenhouse. It really is a unique plant for a hanging basket style. As you can see how it puts out the new growth from it. It comes out of a stem and sets on it. Before it puts out this new growth, there is actually really a unique flower that blooms off the end of it. This is easily to propagate. You can break this off and start a new plant. You can start to see on the rhizome here, you've got roots that are already starting to propagate off of it, and all you need to do is just put that into soil about that level, and it'll start flourishing, put out more roots, and grow. Here's another one that's hanging down. I really wish there was. Here's an old flower that has bloomed in this past time. But again, this plant needs to be broken up and created so that we have more of the hanging iris. There are some people that have them in their gardens at home, but my suggestion is that you use them in hanging pots. They really do a better job in a hanging basket style. Another thing that I'd like to talk about, and some of my students saw this, and it's a unique way of planting orchid. It's an old oak stone that had a hole in the middle, and what I did is on the bottom I took some plastic and nailed it or screwed it down in there, and because it's in the greenhouse and we have an overhead sprinkler, it stays good and moist. It's doing real well. It looks like it already bloomed once, but it's already putting out new growth. And it's just kind of a unique way, if you're into orchids, a way of presenting an orchid. This is the same style. It was a little bit bigger of an oak stump with a little bit of hole, and all I did is take a solid piece of oak cutting and put on the bottom, and then it added this to the top. We planted this this early semester, and you can already see that it's already putting out a bunch of new growth, and as far as I'm seeing, it's really happy in this environment.